Hey there, everyone. Well, welcome back to the Hard Reset. I'm Nick, and I just wanted to make this video to keep the momentum going. It's been trying to really work on just being consistent, make videos that are genuine, and share kind of my life and where I'm at, and some of the thoughts I've been having, and hopefully you can take something away from my words or just my thoughts. But yeah, I was thinking about this idea lately. Um, some been working through some disappointments, some things that didn't work out the way I would like, some things that have disrupted some of my long-term plans, and just trying to get through that frustration, move forward. I think it's just a fact of life. It's not like just because some disappointing things happen doesn't mean you everything's all over and you don't keep going. You have to keep going. You have to show up, wake up the next day and figure out, okay, so what do I do next given that there's now this obstacle or this mistake or this setback. Yeah, and the other day I was just driving and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about some of my setbacks that I've encountered in past years, and looking at where I am today and how the kind of like interplay between those two things, right? It's really different being in being close to the setback or the time that the setback happened. It's very different being in that place versus looking back at the setback 4 to 5 years later, right? And I've mentioned before in one of my other videos about just stupid credit mistake that I made. It was so avoidable, and that's why it hurts so much. It's really crushed me in terms of my own identity, that I can't believe I let something like that happen. And it was so avoidable. It was like, if somebody, it'd be one thing if like I had a debt to pay and I didn't have the money to pay for it, and that's why I didn't pay for it. But if somebody were to come up to me and say, hey, you have this thing due, why don't you pay it? It's like, oh yeah, it'd be easy. I'd do it in 5 minutes and it wouldn't even be an issue. But instead, it got by and it's turned into this kind of, I have to adjust my plan now, right? And I've been thinking about that over the past several days, really, really beating myself up. And it's one of those things where you wake up and you just like, it's kind of the first thing you think about, and you kind of just think like, ugh, this sucks, right? Like, is it still the case? Did this really happen? And yes, I have to deal with it. But yeah, like I said, going back to setbacks, and now I think it's important to acknowledge accountability and acknowledging the mistake so it doesn't happen again, but also that I'm responsible for it, right? I did that balance transfer and then was not on top of things when, or just was not on top of the terms and kind of let it slip by, and that's on me, right? There's nobody else doing this. Now, was it an accident? Yes, it was an accident, but it's still my responsibility and it's my lesson to learn. But as I move forward, some plans I had in the immediate future are being pushed to the intermediate future, I guess. And it had me reevaluate kind of my situation, my goals, and really see how it affects things and how I adjust, right? It's not it's not the end of the world, but it does require some closer examination of what I was trying to do, what are my goals, like review my medium to longer term goals. And what I realized is that sometimes, and this is a bigger kind of lesson that I've learned in other areas, is like sometimes that goal still exists. It's just you might take a different path to it, right? You might have to take a detour to it. And as with detours, it's one thing to have a plan, have a route to that goal, and to stick to it. And I forget what the term is, but it's this principle where I think it's called like destination bias or something like that, where you have a route to a place and you automatically define it as superior to any other plan or route that might come after, right? Because it feels like if you have to adjust and if you have to take another route, well, you're only taking that because the first one's not available, right? And we all know how that feels when you can't have something. You usually want it more, and you perceive it as better, right? So let's call it destination bias. I don't know what it's called. That might be it, but it's this idea where your original idea, your original route is the better route and is the only route in your mind, right? But we know that in practice, that's not necessarily true, right? I think sometimes unexpected benefits, surprises, kind of serendipitous happenings happen when we take a different route that we were not as familiar with, right? Whether it be discovering that detour is a more scenic route, whether you discover stops along the way you would never have discovered. I mean, I could relate this to, I live in California, and I have traveled up to the Bay Area on numerous occasions, and there's many ways to get, well, not many ways, but there's more than one way to get from Southern California to Northern California. And most often it's kind of the main, probably most popular route is to take I think it's the 5 freeway for most of the way. I actually don't know if that's the case. I've done it. I mentally know which way to go, but I just never really think about what number, which highway. But it's pretty much one of the main highways, and it takes about, I think, like 6 hours. Yeah, 6 hours by car, and it's okay. It's simple. There's traffic sometimes. It's like the quickest way. There's all the things that you need, like stops, like bathroom stops, food stops, gas stops. There's probably some interesting stops along the way. And yeah, before, within 6 hours, you're in Oakland or you're in San Francisco, right? But there's another way to get there, which it takes longer. It's less traveled. Not as many people take it. It's not as practical because there's a portion where it's literally a two-lane, two-way stretch where each direction only has one lane, right? Which obviously only, one car can be in that part of the lane at any time, right? So it's it doesn't have the you don't have the luxury as of like more lanes, right? Like 3 to 5 lanes of on a freeway, right? But anyway, so yeah, that route probably takes, I want to say, like 7 to 8 hours when all is said and done. And you might say, well, I'm trying to get things done. I don't want to waste another 2 hours sitting in a car, and there's not as many gas stops to stop at. There's no, that stretch of the trip, there's no major stores. If I need to pick something up at like a Target or something, there's no, big box stores or whatever you call them. And if you just thought about it like that, in that way, you'd be like, okay, yeah, the 6 hour route is better. It's by far better, and it's the only choice. So if you can't take that choice, then every other option sucks, right? But as you dive into it further, you realize that the longer route, that portion where it's one lane going each way, it's coastal. You have the Pacific Ocean right there for that stretch, and you have beautiful, hillsides and cliffs and stuff like that. I think as you get even closer to Northern California, it becomes like you almost feel like you've been transported to another country. You discover things you didn't realize. You see such a variety of terrain. You see volcanic rock. You see like sharp mountainous crags. I don't know what you call them, but like volcanic rock just scattered through kind of like this grassland on one side, and on the other side you see this beautiful ocean. You get to places where it feels like you're almost in Hawaii. It feels tropical. You have like these buildings that seem like little huts, and it feels very tropical. And on the other side you have this beautiful ocean. You have like these little cute little stops that are like little diners and little shops that again feel unfamiliar in a really good way. You, especially as you get close to like Monterey, you see tide pools, and there's places you can stop and literally walk on the tide pools and see sea anemone and mussels and starfish. And again, a large part of this trip is you see the beautiful Pacific Ocean on your I guess when you're going to Northern California, it's on your left, right? And I'm using that as a metaphor because one, one would be quick to say that because you can't take the quicker route, the more efficient route, the more practical route, that, well, every other route is inferior, right? Like it's second best. And what I discovered is that when I did take, I think it's Highway 1, essentially like Pacific Coast Highway or some form of it or another, is that it makes a really big impression. It's almost like life-changing to discover something like that. And unless you may find yourself forced to take that route on occasion, right? Maybe or for whatever reason you have the time to, right? And you say we're gonna do this a little differently. Maybe it's more deliberate. It's a more deliberate decision. But going back, when I drove that, it left such an impression on me. I was like, there's such a beautiful drive, and it felt like I was transported to like another country. I felt like I was transported to places that were beyond California. Even though California was beautiful, I felt like I was like, where am I? In a really good way. Now, it did take like 7 or 8 hours when all was said and done, but I truly appreciated it. It was not the most efficient route, and for whatever reason, I found myself on that route. Yeah, I think I've taken it a couple occasions. One time I went on a surf trip with a friend, and we went that route. I think our idea was that yeah, we can stop wherever we want to surf, was like what we had in mind, and in the end it was like we're not very good surfers, so like in the end what it pretty much meant was we stopped at one place. I think we stopped in Half Moon Bay, and it was a pretty poor showing for us. I don't think we caught anything. And then we got to Santa Cruz to Steamer Lane, and we put on our cold wet wetsuits, which were almost impossible to get on and uncomfortable. And we got on the water to pretty much not catch any waves there either, and just get bested by all the really good surfers. But our intentions were good, and it was still a very enjoyable trip. It was a good bonding time. But yeah, you know, when I've brought up this route to friends and family, I would say, hey, you know, the the route to take like Pacific Coast Highway or Highway 1, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. You know, you should really do it. And it's almost like I would get a really common reaction, which was like, "Oh gosh, but that's going to take you like 7 or 8 hours. It's really a long drive, right? You should really take the 5." And that was the reaction I would get often, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, the 5 is quicker. You're right." And but I was just letting you know that it's beautiful. But that was the reaction, and it's almost like was closed off as an option. It's like, nope, it takes longer. I don't know it as well, so it's off the table. And I can acknowledge that mindset, but I'd encourage people to explore other options, whether it be voluntarily or forced. And going back to this setback, this credit mistake, I've been like really kicking myself, and it may not be a big deal to other people, but to me, I just can't get past it, and I'm just slowly working through it. It just feels so stupid of me, and the more I dig into it, I start to realize that, well, I must be accountable. So it's not like I'm going to erase the mistake and say, well, you know, it didn't really matter, so I don't need to be accountable. No, I'm being fully accountable, but let's move past that. And what I started to discover was that first plan, it seemed like I had all my ducks in a row. Everything is ruined because that plan was perfect, and there's no other plan other than that, right? And the more I dug into it, the more I actually like started to proceed with what would I have done in that plan. I started to realize the limitations, and I started to realize, like just certain things, like I actually wasn't as ready for that plan as I thought I was. Like, for example, I was going to bring cash to financing this ADU, and I looked at my numbers, and I was like, I don't know if I would be comfortable with putting that much of my free cash into that endeavor. Well, let me take a closer look, right? I think I would possibly cause myself a lot of stress by taking all that cash and putting it into that and then financing the rest. I think that would create a very strenuous situation, right? And so I was like, that's one. Another one is I have other things that I'm doing. I have work, I have single parenting, other endeavors, and you know, I'm trying to rent out another property after just getting one rented. I'm also going to be I'm going to be moving homes, and that's going to take time in itself. And it's like, do I really want to, not even considering the amount of cash that's going to get tied up, so that stress, but just adding the additional stress of planning, building, working with contractors, working with delays, finding out stuff is more expensive, I just started to look at it and I was like, it wasn't a done deal. It wasn't necessarily just automatically the superior way to go. Ultimately, what maybe it is, right? But you have to factor in the stress and some of the other costs, whether they be financial costs or just life costs, right? Emotional stress, just stress in general, time cost. And I started to realize that, okay, so that original path is gone. It's gone. It's gone forever, right? And that might be, I have to accept that. But once I started to explore, maybe that's okay, right? Maybe that's okay. And it's pretty much like it comes to making lemonade out of lemons. And I planted the lemon tree and I made the lemons with that mistake. And now I'm left with lemons. And so I will make lemonade. But once I started to accept the mistake, accept that original path is gone, it starts to get a little bit easier. And then I start to explore opportunities. And this is where kind of the magic started to happen, was I started to explore other opportunities, other options. And what I started to realize was I really hadn't looked into the original plan as much as I thought. Still hurts that plan's gone. But as I started to dig into other options out of necessity, I started to realize the limitations of that original plan. I also started to discover other ways or opportunities that I never would have even explored had I just set out on that original plan, never made a mistake, and lived with this perception of like being perfect, right? Because it's never, being perfect is an illusion, and mistakes, if it wasn't that mistake, I know I would be making some mistake just as bad in some other area of my life. And that still could happen, right? But it made me start to explore also not only those opportunities where I started to say, hey, I actually have a lot of options, and like, these are pretty good. They're not necessarily worse. Maybe they are. They're not necessarily better, but they're different. And just different doesn't mean worse, right? It's out of necessity. I don't have that other option anymore, but these are good options. And I started to look at my past and other instances where a setback yielded, I guess, treasure, for lack of a better word. And when I lost my job like 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, we took it really hard. Obviously, it's like a big, especially in American culture, it's such a big part of our identity, right? And it happened in a way that was just kind of screwed up, but it was very what's the word of the opposite of disempowering, I guess. It was very disempowering and life-changing in a bad way. Well, that's what I'm going to get to. It was very life-changing. And what I realized was, I sit here today knocking on the door, turning the corner on profitability in trading, where I'm seeing success as it grows and grows. And it's not overnight. It's taken almost 5 years to get to this point with a lot of pain and failure. And what I realized that if I had kept that job that I got laid off from, where would that really leave me today, right? I definitely would not have embarked on this trading journey. And I can't say that for sure, but likely it would not be in the condition that it is today. But if I had to make a guess, it would not exist. I would still be in that job, maybe with a promotion, or maybe on track to get laid off at another time or at another job, or be really unhappy with my occupation with nothing ever, nothing over the horizon, and just I'm gonna work until I die. I'm gonna this is maybe it's turned into like a dead end kind of a position, but there's no room for growth there, right? I could be really resentful. I could still be in the job. I'll have it. I won't know, if that in that fork in the road, or I mean, if I had taken that path, not got laid off, I would be in that job. But who knows what my mindset would be then? I would have just carried on, knowing nothing, not knowing anything different, and not discovering trading. And I think I would find dissatisfaction in the limitation of that alternate path, right? But at face value at the time, I was like, I got laid off. It's terrible. It's a bad thing. It's only a bad thing. It'll only be a bad thing forever. But really, it forced me, and I think this is another condition, is I think that it requires a level of resilience, a level of saying, well, I can't take that path, but I'm not quitting, but I'm going to have to explore other things, right? You can't give up, but yeah, I think at the time I was like, well, that option's gone. I'm going to do whatever it takes to survive and move forward. And it's like, what are some of my other options? And there lies the treasure, right? And you say that only would have happened if that setback happened. So I'm not saying setbacks are good, but I think if your mindset is right, you're patient, you're disciplined, you don't quit, you are resourceful, you are willing to adapt and consider opportunities you had never done before, I think you can turn setbacks into treasure. And the craziest thing, and this is kind of the kernel of the video, is that treasure is likely better than what the original plan was. So I wanted to share that. I wanted to get that out. I've been working through that over the past several days, but I've been working through that idea in another case over the last 5 years, and I can prove, at least with regards to the layoff, that this is the better path. Looking back, I would not want to be on that original path. I'm so much happier being on my current path. There's so much more potential, and that original path, who knows what would have happened, but I think I'd probably take this path. Anyway, I set out for this to be a short video, but it turned out to be longer. But I really appreciate you watching, listening. Hopefully you have something valuable to take away. I'm really trying to get better at making these. I think this is one of my better ones. Some of my other ones were just, I watch them, I'm like, ugh, I cringe. But anyway, I hope to keep this up. And if there's a topic you want me to speak on, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. So till then, take care. Bye-bye.